opening slide for our AEC Infrastructure webcast. This is being presented for the Autodesk 2020 products, which have been released to the general public and the world at this point. So I believe everyone has access to everything that I will be sharing with you today, which is primarily focused on some of the newer features and functions that are in the infrastructure-related products of our AEC collection. As Katana mentioned, my name is Matt, and I will be your presenter for the session this morning or afternoon, depending on where in the world you are located. Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday. I hope everyone is having a great Friday and had a great week and is getting ready to enjoy the weekend as well. As we get started, I'll go over a couple of introductions. I saw some names that I recognized, so if you already know who I am, then this is all going to be review. I'll just go over a quick introduction of myself as well as some of our ISD services, and then we'll jump straight into the demonstration and presentation. I don't have too many slides today. I think less than 10 in total, but I do have all of my applications open and running. So hopefully I'll be able to poke around in there and show you a couple of the features live as they are available in the 2020 products. I do have a lot of sample files that have just been pre-set up for these particular cases and scenarios. So if you do have very, very specific questions or need more details about some particular feature or function, please let us know, and we will perhaps take that off of the call after this session is done, or we can do a follow-up with you at a later date as well. So for beginners, my name is Matt. I am the ISD team manager for the Western region of Imagineit. I've been in the reseller channel for the better part of a decade. It's coming up on, I believe, 10 years or 11 years in August. Actually, it's over 10 years now. I started out as an engineer in the design field, civil engineering. I got my license in civil engineering as well. And then after the company I was working for switched over to Civil 3D, I was able to find a job working with one of the channel partners and went from the end user to sort of the technical specialist on board, and did a lot of training and consulting services, technical support there. And over the years, eventually made my way up to the team managers. So I now manage our technical staff on the western side of the United States and Canada here at Imagineit. I am, or was, an Autodesk certified instructor, still providing training in some cases for our customers here out west. And I'm also a certified professional with AutoCAD and Civil 3D and Infraworks. My background is, again, entirely in engineering. Started out as a mechanical engineer in college and then ended up as a civil engineer through the course of student internships and professional licensure there. So I'm still a civil engineer, and that's primarily what my background is in design-wise. For today, what we are going to focus on are our Autodesk 2020 infrastructure-related products. And in this case, again, I'm focusing primarily on the main pieces that we've been using here in-house, as well as some of the products that I like to use personally in my own testing and just sort of learning capabilities here with Imagineit. So I'll start out with AutoCAD and Civil 3D. Those are sort of our hero products. The AutoCAD platform, of course, is what Civil 3D is built on top of. So much of the features and functions that were added to AutoCAD 2020 are also going to be available to you in Civil 3D. On top of that, there is a secondary piece of Civil 3D with the 2020 version because of a new survey database format. So there is a Civil 3D survey database migration tool that you can use. We're going from SDVX files to SQLite databases for Civil 3D survey. So there is a tool now that allows you to migrate the old SDVX databases into the new SQL format so that you can use them in the 2020 release. That is something that you will notice there. When you open up a drawing in Civil 3D 2020, if you're trying to connect to an old database, there will be nothing there. So if you set your working folder to an existing working folder where an old database is saved, that will not show up on the list. You will need to migrate it over. Fortunately, there is a little warning sign that tells you that you can migrate it over directly from the program. So you have two options there of right-clicking on it inside of the survey tab, or you will be able to launch the migration utility and path it to the folder and file that you want on your own. Infraworks is another product that we always try to take a look at whenever we have new versions and releases. Unlike the other products in our infrastructure collection, Infraworks is not on an annual rollout, so this isn't technically a 2020 release. It's primarily just what's current up to this point inside of Infraworks. There were some new features that were released with the issue of all of the other products out there, so I'll highlight some of the newer features. There are a couple that are very, very nice. For those of you using ArcGIS, there is a save back to ArcGIS now. If you're using structures, there's a way to edit structures in a spreadsheet file instead of directly inside of Infraworks palettes. Then there's also some visualization tools that we can take a look at related to road cut and fill quantities. And then finally, just to sort of roll some current events into our presentation, we have a couple of things with a recap and recap photo. For those of you who are following the news, there's a big cathedral fire a few weeks back. And one of the big things that came up after that was that someone had been able to scan or laser scan the entire cathedral a few years ago prior to the fire. So there is some records that we now have that can be used to help rebuild that. And that is a laser scanning opportunity. I believe in the article there was a Leica reference there, so it was Leica laser scanners that the guy used. But just laser scanning in general, how it's been sort of evolving throughout the years. It's in the news more and more as we see these days. And then, of course, with the update to Recap Photo, that's now part of Recap Pro that you can access. Used to be Project Memento. You now have the ability to create some models out of photographs as well. So we'll take a look at some of those articles that are in the news, as well as a case scenario where you can actually go from a scan to model to an actual product that we have to talk about. So Autodesk 2020 Infrastructure Products. This is our webcast for May 2019. All right. In addition to all of the information that we have related to those 2020 products, I just wanted to do a quick mention of our ISD Consulting services that we offer here at Imagine It as well. Not only are we an Autodesk channel partner doing sales and services with Autodesk products, but we also have our own internal services group that provides consulting to our customers in the industry as well. We offer a couple of different opportunities here for assistance with Civil 3D Jumpstart, which is a template package that we offer, pre-developed template file for Civil 3D, plus some on-site consulting services to customize that for your internal organizations. We have a strategic process review service that we provide as well, where we can interview and provide some recommendations on improvements or areas that could be enhanced or even efficiency increased within your organization. Civil 3D health checks on projects that you've already completed that you may have run into some issues with. We can take a look at all of those files and evaluate the workflow there as well and provide some recommendations on how possible issues may be prevented or avoided the next time around. If you have custom content, we have a development team that does create custom content programming-wise and also parts-wise. If you are in the market for training or custom part builder content for Civil 3D pipes and pipe networks, that's something that we can offer as well, along with our custom training. And then outside of the Autodesk world, we do offer Leica partnership, which is the laser scanning partner that we are in work with. And then we have a reality capture team as well as Pix4D. So if you are a Pix4D customer, or if you are in the market for Pix4D training, we are the Pix4D North American partner that provides the bulk of the training services there. So if you do sign up for a Pix4D class, it would likely be one of our technical specialists that is providing that training for you there. So that's just a quick overview of our background ISD Consulting services that we offer, as well as the software purchases through Imagine. All right, so now the good stuff. Let's get into our AutoCAD first of all. So AutoCAD 2020. Again, I'm not highlighting everything there is to know about AutoCAD 2020. Primarily just some of the cool stuff that I liked or I've tested out and I think is pretty good to show and share. First of all, one of the big things that you're going to see, big things that you notice up front is that there's a slightly different color that's applied to the dark theme. I myself am a big fan of the blue color, so I like the dark blue theme that we've got going there. It has replaced the gray, so it was dark gray and silver-ish before the 2020 release. Now that's been enhanced to a dark blue background, which is sort of nicer on the eyes. It's a little bit softer palette to take a look at. And to go along with the theme, the support for high definition and high resolution monitors has also been improved. For those of you who've been using big screen TVs or you've got a wide panel monitor and you've been noticing that the icons get all sort of out of whack when you connect it to something that's at a much higher resolution, that has been slightly resolved in the 2020 release. I do have a high resolution widescreen that I use on the side of my main monitor here, and that is looking much better at the highest resolution that I can get to. Also, if you ever had set that to like a super high resolution on a laptop and you end up seeing like those like really tiny icons and things, that's all sort of in the works for being resolved there. So support for the high resolution monitors and displays, that's been added to the 2020 release outside of just the visual color change. The quick measure tool, something that I'll talk about as well, that is the measure geometry command in AutoCAD. When you're clicking on measure, you don't actually have to snap to anything now. You're going to get some lines that float around on the screen that will allow you to just go straight to it and pop up some different measurements here and there for the objects that you're moving around. Also, we have a DWG compare tool that's been enhanced a little bit to add more features that allow you to just directly import the changes or the differences that you detect. And the purge command is one that I really am a fan of this time, because in the past when we were working with the purge command, what you would see is purgeable items, non-purgeable items, and if it was a non-purgeable item, you just see it's not purgeable. It's going to block you from doing it. In this case, with the updated purge command, there's a new sort of dialog box that you're going to be presented with, and one of the things that you see in the dialog box is where the object is being used that is preventing you from purging it. So if you need to fix it or figure out where or what is preventing you from getting rid of that in your drawing file, there's now a clue into that with the purge command dialog box. So those are the things that we're going to sort of take a look at here in AutoCAD 2020. First of all, I'll go straight into the program here with the Start tab. This isn't changed at all from the previous versions, but what you can see is that we do have that sort of dark blue background there. So it's kind of a dark bluish gray compared to the old gray that was the 2019 version and prior. So that's just one of those enhancements. The icons have been changed a little bit as well to make them a little clearer for you to see, as well as that support for the high resolution monitors that we saw as well. I have here one of our standard drawing files from our training classes that we normally teach with. This one's called Big House for those of you who've taken one of our classes or used the Ascent training manual before. I'm just going to use this to show off some of those features that we were talking about. Outside of the color scheme there, the first one that I had mentioned was the quick measure tool. That measure tool is going to be up there inside of our utilities panel where it normally is. But the new change is that when you now click on it, your crosshair turns orange, and as you start to move around on the screen, it will automatically start to report those distances for you. So without having to click on anything, I am now able to find the dimensions that I want for the different objects that I have on the screen. If I just need to see, what's the size of the garage, I can see that I've got 1810, and then if I go down to that spot there where I'm hitting the actual walls and not going through one of the gaps, I've got 1810 by 23'5". So we've got all of these sort of quick measure tools. The one thing that I noticed about it, though, is that it hits everything. So it's not going to be, just detecting wall to wall. It'll detect the door swing there. It detects the door itself. If there's nothing for it to hit, then it is going to just expand out to nowhere, and you're not going to get any measurements in that particular direction. So it does require you to move around to a spot that works out for the tool itself. And as you can see, I've got that water tank there that's in the garage. And if I move to that spot, it's going to stop at the water tank. It's not really going to let me just extend out to the walls. So it's not layer specific or object specific. It is just going to hit whatever it hits in that particular direction. But that's pretty neat. It's very similar to something that we had before with with dynamic input, where you could just hover over the box and it would give you sort of your dimensions left and right. So this one is more of a dynamic measure tool, where you're just now clicking on the command to get it active, and then it's going to be able to read the distances for you. As you can see here as well, it doesn't hit text. So text is one of the things that it will sort of go through and not measure up to. So text and text boxes, or text boxes, are actually lines, so that might be something that it hits. But general text in there, it'll go through the text, but not anything like arcs or line work. The DWG compare command is the other one that I had mentioned as one of the top features for AutoCAD 2020. What you see open on my screen now are two different versions of the drawing. So I have a Big House version 2, Big House version 1. I just made a couple of small adjustments to it. But if you were just receiving these files and you saw them side by side or something like that, it might be a little bit more difficult to identify what's changed from version 1 to version 2. So what we can do now with the Collaborate tab of the ribbon is click on the DWG Compare option. At that point, you're going to choose the second file that you want to compare with the one that you currently have open, and it'll automatically right there inside of your AutoCAD session highlight the areas that are different. So what's the difference between Big House 1, version 1, and version 2? Number one, the garage size has changed. One of the support columns has been removed to open up that area in between the dining room and the foyer, and our nook has also been removed. And in order to highlight sort of the new or enhanced part of this compared to the previous DWG compare, there are a couple of new icons that you can use up here. And one of those is going to be the import objects. So you can import the objects directly from that compared drawing if you want to apply those changes to your file. So you have that access right there in your session to not only compare the two drawing files, but actually incorporate the changes as well. And if you wanted to take a look at those settings, you can see settings for green only in the current drawing, so this is in my current drawing. And then I also have red from the other drawing. And then, of course, we have the cloud, whether you want to show the cloud or not, and hatching in text. So we have those options for visual display as well as the option to import the changes directly. Of course, when you're done, you can exit that, and it will remove that background drawing from your session. The last thing here that I will show off in AutoCAD is going to be our updated purge command. So that purge command, it's still purge, just like we all know, but within the purge dialog box, this is now what has been changed or updated. We have purgeable items and non-purgeable items that you can find. Also built in now, we have that zero length geometry, orphan data, empty text objects. Those were all items that had to be done through dash purge or some scripts in the past. They were not just automatically built into the purge command. I believe we had orphan data at one point, but not the rest of it. We had to do that dash purge and Z and dash purge and E or dash purge and O to get them all out of there. So on top of that standard list that we are normally used to seeing, we have a non-purgeable items. And if we see non-purgeable items, for example, we want to get rid of the appliances layer. We can see that this layer cannot be purged because it's being used. It's got 8 items on it, and it's currently frozen. And we'll see that it's got 8 lines. So we can search for those lines, and we would see that it's going to take us straight to where they are. And then we could turn that on to see what the content is. So now we have a way to get to those objects. We have a way to display those objects and find them. And then we can clean them up, get rid of them, and then we can purge out that object or layer in this case. that we were originally prevented from doing. So that new updated purge command with the find of non-purgeable items, that's a pretty handy one for anybody that's ever had to try and figure out where these things are that are not allowing you to purge something out of your drawing file. So find non-purgeable items. That's one of the enhancements to that purge command. Outside of that, everything is still pretty standard in terms of what we can do with the purge tool. Of course, checking the boxes, unchecking the boxes, and then we've got that purge all items to get rid of everything in there. Dash purge is still around. If you do dash purge, it's still going to give you sort of the same thing that we saw before with all of those individual items to be listed out there. This is showing up in my command line at this point because my dynamic input window is currently off. But that dash purge tool is still around and still working. So those are our primary highlights for AutoCAD 2020. New dark theme, the quick measure tool that we saw from the utilities panel. We have DWG compare from the collaborate tab of the ribbon, and then our updated purge command. Outside of those things, there was mention of an efficiency update to AutoCAD and the way that it processes and saves information. Supposedly saves you about a half a second per drawing file. And for those of you who are working with smaller drawings, that might not be too big of a deal. But in a lot of cases, half a second could add up to a lot of time overall. So there are some efficiency tools that have also supposedly made it faster for AutoCAD to save and backup drawings in your sessions as well. So that is AutoCAD 2020. Moving on to Civil 3D. Since Civil 3D is built on top of AutoCAD, we will see all of those same features and functions available to us in the Civil 3D application as well. But when we look at more specific to Civil 3D enhancements and tools, there are some very, very nice options and new features that we can talk about there. Number one, although it's not listed here at the top of the list, I will mention that there is a file format compatibility for 2018 to 2020. So when we open up drawing files, you can still open up 2018 and 2019 files in 2020. They're still based on the AutoCAD 2018 format, so you will be able to see the objects there. The one thing that is different is, of course, going to be your survey database. That is something that's been upgraded from our DBX files to our SQLite files. And then, of course, as always with any new features and functions that are added version to version, if you are using those features and functions and then you try to open it in a previous version of Civil 3D, those will just not be accessible to you. So anything that you do in 2020 that's strictly for Civil 3D 2020 is only going to work there. But you would still be able to recognize the objects and work with the standard stuff in 2018 or 2019 as well. And that is so far true based on the testing that I've done with our sample files. So I've opened a sample file from one of our previous version class projects, and everything has been working there. I didn't get any messages saying, no, this is from an older version and needs to be saved and all of that stuff. So it does appear to be compatible from version to version. I do have an icon here on the bottom right corner also mentioning that Civil 3D survey database migration. When you launch that, it's not an actual program. It's just a little dialog box that pops up, which you should be able to see now. And it's going to ask you to point to that old folder and get to the new folder where you're going to convert it from SQL to SQLite. And that's just going to upgrade everything in that database so that you can now use it in 2020. And then, of course, once you upgrade it to 2020, it's going to be a new format, so it's not going to work in the previous one anymore. So that is something that you need to be aware of there as well. They are not going to be dynamically linked together. They are completely separate objects. One is an old file from the previous version, and one's going to be a new file for the new version. So they are not going to be tied together where if you upgrade it and work on it in 2020 and save it, you're going to expect it to show up in 2018 in the old SQL database. So just be aware of that. If you are upgrading your survey database, once it's upgraded to a new thing, and it's not just a separate linked version of the old one. So that is something that is 2020 specific. When we look at our Civil 3D 2020 product, I've just got another sample file open here from our standard courseware. This is just a basic drawing that we've got and we're looking at here. And sorry about that. Let me go back to Civil 3D. When we are looking at it, I've got a pipe network in here, I've got some surfaces in there, and we will take a look at this file for our demonstration purposes. When I do a save as, you can see that it is that AutoCAD 2018 drawing. Nothing there relative to new versions or cross-version compatibility. We should be able to just save it and open it as is. So file formats are going to work. When we look at that survey database, so let me run through this one real quick. If I set a working folder to a folder that's got a current version, or sorry, excuse me, previous version database, and this is the database that came from 2018 and 2019, so that's that SDBX file that I was talking about before. When you set it to a working folder there, what you're going to get is a big warning sign. Oh, sorry, I set it to another one, of course. You get a big warning sign that says, in order to use it, it has to be migrated. At that point, you can do a right-click and migrate. It's going to launch that same little utility dialog box that we saw before. Or if you want to launch that manually, you can get to it from your Autodesk folder in the Start menu, and then select that and do it ahead of time. Once that's migrated, if you have a migrated version, then what you would see there is a new version, or I guess an updated version of that database that's going to be open for you to access. So that sample SDBX file, that's actually a new one that I did. Let me go back to the previous one. And then we're going to migrate it here. So we do a start migration, and then when its migration has succeeded, we're going to say OK. And then we should be able to get to that from there. Let me see where my folder is. All right, there we go. So that's that SQLite survey database that we've got available to us in our folder. And then that also pops up in the drawing file. And we've got all of our same figures, all of our same survey points with the import events still listed there, but now in that new format that is compatible with 2020. And then, of course, just a reminder, this is no longer compatible with 2019 or 18 since it is a different format of that database. So this is specific to 2020. Any changes we make there is going to be accessible via that survey tab in this version only. If you are working with a previous one and most of your database stuff is going to be there, I would say stick with that one. So open up 2018 or 2019 to do the survey work. And then, of course, you would be able to still save that drawing and then open the drawing in 2020. As long as you're not accessing the database, you should be all right. Okay, so next step along the line, I did not put a whole lot of emphasis on it during that slide, but we do have a new Analyze Gravity Network tool that's built into Civil 3D 2020 as well. So this is not SSA. This is not any of the H&H additional products that you have that come with Civil 3D. This is a direct inside of Civil 3D analysis of the gravity flow systems that we have. So when we're looking at Civil 3D here, if we're taking a look at our pipe network, which is in this case a drainage line, when I click on that drainage line, I will have the option inside of that contextual ribbon tab to analyze my gravity network. And this is a built-in tool that pops up in a little dialog box. We can resize pipes and inverts. We can compute the EGL and HGL, or we can just do a quick inlet analysis. And you can check these on and off as needed to get to what you need to do. You also have your rainfall IDF curves that you can link there. So if you've got IDF files, you can save those and link them to your analysis, and then, of course, choose your frequency there. So we've got like a 10-year, 50-year, 100-year storm that you can choose from and build that in. So if we do a quick analysis there, I can see that I've got my analysis results. We can apply these results. If I cancel that, go back to my gravity network. Let's say we want to do a resize or not resize pipes and inverts, but compute the energy and hydraulic grade line. So I'll do an analysis there. It's telling me that with this particular setup, I've got surcharge there, so my flow is basically going to be too much for this to handle at these sizes and so forth. So we're going to do a start over and resize as well. analyze there, and now I've got minimum cover with my pipe analysis, and now my performance is within range. So we've got options to do that, and applying those options should also make those changes for you, and we have now a new updated pipe network. So that's not SSA or anything like that. That's external to Civil 3D. This is all built in where you can analyze your gravity network and also apply those changes. One thing that I did notice when I was setting this up is that the structure properties and pipe properties all need to be set up correctly in order for it to work. Otherwise, you're going to get warnings all the time where it says, in this case, some network detail information is preventing the analysis from starting. That means that some piece of your pipe network doesn't have all of the data that it needs. Could be the roughness coefficient, could be the calculated flow or the expected flow. Just something in that is going to be preventing it from doing all of the calculations that it needs. And in this case, if I go there and I say, I want to look at the network details, it gives me a table right off the bat where I can see my N value, or that roughness coefficient's not provided for all of them. So I just have to type that in, and then I would be able to do the analysis. The other thing that we always want to check is your flow values. If these are all zeros, or if these are zeros, then that's not going to give you any calculation either, because there's no flow assumed coming into the system. So that's kind of the options that you want to double check. You can do it here through the dialog box, or you can go to your individual structure properties and pipe properties, and within that properties window, you're now going to be able to set your known flow values. And then, of course, for your pipes, you're going to have your roughness coefficients. And you do need to set them for all of it. So you can't just say, you know, at this structure, I'm going to have 3 cubic feet or cubic yards of flow. The pipe's going to still be 0 if you only set the structure. So you have to set them all for the pieces of your system in order for it to work. But that is a pretty neat tool. So if you need to sort of check your pipe sizing or check your network sizing for analysis, you would be able to do that through the program directly, and not just through SSA or some other third-party application if you're not using an Autodesk product for analysis. If anybody is doing scripts and macros, there is a new Dynamo for Civil 3D option as well. With the Dynamo for Civil 3D option, you are going to have access to Dynamo for scripts and macros that you can build. If you are a 2019.2-ish user and you've seen the Rail and Transparent Command ribbon tabs, that's also something that's been slightly modified in 2020. I can't say that it's a huge change, but one of the things that we saw with 2019 was that the Rail and Transparent tabs were sort of linked to the Survey tab. So if you're trying to get rid of the Rail tab, perhaps you're not using Rail, but you want to use the Transparent tab. In 2019, there wasn't a way to do that. They were both kind of all or nothing. So you could see them or you can't see them. In the CUI for the 2020 version, what we have is an option to actually see the Rail and Transparent Command toolbar independently. So there are ribbon tabs specifically for Rail here and for Transparent Commands way down at the bottom. And this wasn't part of the 2019 update when they issued it out. So you kind of had to see them both, or you didn't see them at all. But they are there now, so if you can control them a little bit more independently. And that is sort of the big deal with Civil 3D in 2020. The biggest one probably is going to be the analyzed gravity networks, and then, of course, the new survey database file format there. The measure tool that we talked about inside of AutoCAD, that dynamic measuring tool, it is part of Civil 3D as well. However, it's not really available or easy to find anywhere in the ribbon. So if you do a measure command, or measure geometry, I guess it is, measure geometry, then that's going to launch that orange crosshair for you where it's going to start to give you those dimensions. Civil 3D is a bit trickier to measure because of the amount of line work that is in there. So as you can see, it's hitting my contours, it's hitting all the other stuff that's around and not just going to the standard object line work. And this is not display order or anything dependent either. It is everything's there that's creating boundaries, and it's just measuring the insides of the boundaries. So you might want to work with some visual display, maybe turn some layers on and off if you're going to use the tool quite a bit, and then just go from there. But you do have access to it. It's just not easily available like it is in the plain AutoCAD ribbon. If you've got the tools available, or if you're customizing your workspace and you can add that in there, that is something that you can do as well. So that is our Civil 3D 2020 enhancements. Let's go with Infraworks next. So Infraworks is going to be the next one that we take a look at, just kind of running through the list of our infrastructure design products for Autodesk in the current version. With Infraworks, as I mentioned before, it's not on an annual rollout basis, so this isn't technically Infraworks 2020 for the year. This is pretty much just the current version of Infraworks that's available up to this point with the latest updates installed. One of the big changes, or one of the big things that I really appreciate that they fixed, was the BIM 360 connection with Model Builder. So if any of you had been working with Infraworks over the past year or so, when they built that BIM 360 option into Infraworks, if you were part of a BIM 360 project, your Model Builder was limited or restricted to BIM 360 only. There was no way to save a local model once you were part of a BIM 360 project. If you could remove yourself from BIM 360 and not link your account to any projects, then you would be able to go back to saving local models, but there was no option of one or the other. It was either you are in BIM 360 or you're not. With one of the updates, I believe it was the previous to 2020 version, they did allow you to choose whether or not your Model Builder was saving locally or saving to BIM 360, and that is now built into the current version of Infraworks as well. So the Model Builder tool itself is still the same. You're still going to get the same interface, still be able to search for and download the same types of data. But when you do the actual download of the model, so after the model has been found and built, when you click on it to open it up in Infraworks, it does a local download or a BIM 360 option, and you have the choice to do that within the dialog box. It's going to say, do you want to save it to BIM 360 or do you want to save it locally? And you'll see that very familiar cloud icon or the home house icon if they are local models versus cloud models. One of the other big changes that we saw, or enhancements, is the opportunity to now save back to ArcGIS Online. So if you have data that you are controlling and developing in ArcGIS, this is currently just geometry, so it's things like pipe networks, structures, and so forth, not points of interest at this point. But if you have geometry that's in there from your own ArcGIS information and you're bringing that into Infraworks, once you see it in Infraworks, if you need to make a change, you can move things around and then save it back to ArcGIS, and it's going to update your ArcGIS option in there. The other two things that are sort of new or nice enhancements in Infraworks are the ability to edit structures in spreadsheets. So the structures that we're talking about here are bridge structures. So if you've got bridges that you're modeling in there with the piles and foundations and things, you can export all of that data out to an Excel file and make changes and then update it from the changes. So it's a pretty nice thing to see, just all in Excel, as opposed to having to deal with a number of different panels and boxes and things that are popping up inside of the Infraworks window. And of course, more and more dialog boxes and panels you have, the less and less of the model you can actually see. So with the ability to edit outside of the product and then publish or post those changes, that gives us a little bit more flexibility with being able to see everything and control everything data-wise. Outside of that, we've got a slightly updated stylization for road cut and fill. Whenever you're dealing with component roads and you've got cut areas and fill areas, you now have the ability to apply different styles to cut areas or fill areas, to color code them or highlight them a little bit more in your models. And these can be done for each road, so that they're not one style for cut and one style for fill only. You can select the road and actually choose the cut style and the fill style independently inside of your model. And for that, we have another example. So I'm going to switch over to Infraworks here. This is one of the models that I have just kind of built out for some demonstration purposes. You can see that it's got pretty nice size of area, flat land as well as hilly land. Those contours that you see came from one of the updates in 2019 as well. So the contours that we see there on the surface model are now built into Infraworks as well. Other than that, this model came from Model Builder. It is, when we go back to the home screen, it is a BIM 360 cloud-based model, but I do have additional local models there as well as shared models that I haven't downloaded yet. So you see a number of different icons and things that appear on your home screen. Again, that Model Builder tool, the whole interface is still the same. When you search for the area, when you download the data, you give it a name, you create the model, all of that is still identical to it. The only difference is once the model is available to you, when you actually click on it to download, it's then going to prompt you with a small dialog box that says, you want to save it locally or do you want to save it to BIM 360? And then that's where you would get either the cloud for the BIM 360 located model or the house for your local model. And of course, if you are going to be off-site or somewhere that you don't have internet access, you probably want to save it locally as opposed to save it in the cloud. So once that model is open, we have the ability now to navigate our way through it and just kind of running through the options that we have there. I do have a ArcGIS file that I was working on. This is just a pretty simple one. And of course, it is readily available data. So we have, or I have sort of a limited ArcGIS account. So I can't do a whole lot of content creation. But when I look at what I've got, I have the ability to search for available ArcGIS data. And then if I need to save it to my own account, I can save it to a map there. So what I did was I just looked for a couple of things in this area. It happens to be the island of Kauai in Hawaii there. And I was able to find some fire stations and police stations. The fire station geometry didn't work out quite so well, but the police station did. So we get these little points of interest that pop up here in my ArcGIS map. I did save this to my account. So when I look at my available maps on my account, I would be able to see that police and fire station map of data from ArcGIS. And then, of course, inside of Infraworks, if we needed to connect to it, we would have that ArcGIS connector tool that was introduced a few years back, or not a few years back, a few versions back, I should say. And that's going to give you access to your content, showing you the region where your model is covering, and then, of course, the data that you have. So I have that police and fire map that I had saved to my ArcGIS account. And then when I check the box and add it to the model, I would add these as points of interest. And that would apply those dots, in this case, to my model. This happens to be just a small area of the island, and there's not many police stations on the island in total. So when I look at this, I do have that one that pops up there on the screen. So that one point of interest becomes my police station on the island of Kauai in this area that I have my model built on. And that came straight from my ArcGIS map. The tool that we were talking about earlier was the fact that we can now, if we were perhaps upgrading that police station or moving it to a new spot or relocating it, maybe we're going to move it around somewhere. Once that ArcGIS data has been modified in your Infraworks model, you do have an option to right-click and save back. So that save back option is the new feature that's been introduced with this version of Infraworks. And that allows you to save the change that you made in your model back to your ArcGIS map. In this case, it's unfortunately not going to work because of the type of data that I have. In this case, it was a point of interest, which is not necessarily geometry. It's just a coordinate point. So if I try to do this, it's going to tell me that in this particular version, only geometry is going to be available to make a change. So things like pipe networks and structure locations and so forth. If I click OK here, I'm going to get an error that says it failed to save back. But that is essentially the tool that we are looking at in Infraworks for the current version 2020. So that GIS connector tool now has a saving back to ArcGIS option. The other one that we have here is going to be our spreadsheet changes. So if I have a bridge in my model there that I've just kind of zoomed to, I see that we have a bridge structure that's available inside of Infraworks. And if I do a right click on that, I have a send to spreadsheet option. If you've got a brand new bridge that you're working on, you can do a create a new spreadsheet where it's going to generate that file from scratch and populate it with all of the data. I did prep this ahead of time, so instead of creating a new one, I'm just going to say open existing, and what you will see is an Excel file that now has different tabs for the components. We have a bridge, the deck, the piers, the foundations, the abutments, the girder, and so forth. And all of these are now available to you to modify within Excel. And you can see that there are some blue areas and some black or gray areas. The blue areas are the items that you are allowed to make changes to. So perhaps I want to add a tooltip to the bridge component of this structure. I'll call this one Waimea Bridge. And that's just sort of the name of the bridge itself. We could put in a tag that says the date that it was created. Perhaps it's being upgraded or so forth. You can put in a date for upgrades or a date for renovations and reconstructions. And when we save this and go back to the drawing file, of course, we have different components here. So there are bridges, there's girders, and so forth. You have to click on the right component. So if I have the girder selected, but I made a change to the bridge tab, then those changes aren't going to quite be correct. But once I have that component selected correctly, I can update the existing. And when we make the update to the existing, that tooltip that I applied there in the spreadsheet now appears as a tooltip for that component inside of the drawing. So that was a very, very basic modification that I made, but you can see that it is linked to that spreadsheet that was exported out and then updated again. You are not limited to just simple text like tooltips and tags and data. You can actually change the geometry of that as well by modifying everything in that spreadsheet. And of course, that was a simple right-click to export, creating a new Excel file, and then once that Excel file is changed, you're going to do another right-click to update the model from there. So we have that edit structures in spreadsheet, and now update the structures from those edits available to you as well. The final thing that I had mentioned was the stylization for cut and fill. This is more of a visualization tool. So again, working with things like component roads where we have our design that involves either a cut area or a fill area. In this case, we now have the ability to stylize those sections. So this area here on the outside of our main travelway, you can see is sort of a daylight, which is in fill in this particular case. And by selecting the component road, we now have the ability to stylize cut material and fill material. This is something that is only available with a fixed slope method. If you do a fixed width method, then it's going to grade out to a specific value there. And it doesn't give you all of those options to stylize the data. But you can pre-stylize the data. As you see, it saved that style that was applied before and then now limits the grading to, let's say, we're at 25 feet. When you're 25 feet, it's going to update the model. And then we'll see that it is now a wider grading, but still using that same style that had been applied prior. So in order to change the style, just remember you have to go with fixed slope. But once you have the style applied, if you wanted to change that, you could change it there down with your other options. So let's say I want my cut material to be going to be plain dirt. My fill material, maybe it's going to be sand. Or that's actually bricks. Let's say my cut material is going to stay the same, and then my fill material is going to be sand. When we do that, as soon as we hit enter to apply those property changes, the model will update as well, and then we should be able to see that new material there. So I now see, a little bit too far with the zoom. I see that new yellow fill material for my sand color based on that cut and slope grading. You are not limited to just materials like grass or sand or dirt or brick. You can use colors as well, or ground coverages that you've specified there to different color code or these areas of cut and fill in your project. So Infraworks 2020, big features and enhancements there. Your ability to do that BIM 360 or local model save option. Your save back to ArcGIS online for the geometry, and then we also have the structure edits in spreadsheets. And for those of you who have been working with structures in Infraworks and trying to modify all of these things, it was kind of a hassle to, number one, you've got to make sure you're clicking on the right thing, And then 2, you have to deal with just the panel that's there. I mean, you could float this around or move it to another screen, but you're sort of limited to one thing at a time, whereas with the spreadsheet, you have everything in one spreadsheet on different tabs down at the bottom that you can just sort of cycle through, make all of your changes, save them, and then update changes back in your model all at once. So that was Infraworks 2020 and the enhancements there. Just a couple of things left. I'm going to talk a little bit about Recap. Recap 2020 is released as well. Not a huge amount of changes that I could tell based on my limited normal use of the product, but I did want to bring to your attention a couple of things that have been in the news lately in regards to laser scanning. And of course, Recap is our Autodesk product that helps us deal with laser scanning. So that cathedral fire that we had talked about, fortunately, if we are reading in the news or following anything in the news, you may have heard or seen that we have some laser scanning that had been done for cathedrals, and that's something that was done prior to the fire as well. So this is a laser scan that's been built of another one, but we do have that opportunity to now leverage the information that this person had scanned and possibly use that to help reconstruct the structures. And that's going to be, as true to life as we can get. It's not drawn as built, it is a scanned as built, which was exactly what was there when he was doing the scanning a few years prior to the fire. In addition to the cathedral scans, we are finding more and more lost civilizations, it appears. And this is something that you see on TV every once in a while, and it's been picking up steam as well because of the amount of information that we're able to process. So not only are we just able to scan everything, but we're able to scan vast amounts of information, vast amounts of land, and that's actually helping a lot of archaeologists find things that are buried inside a forest and buried under a whole lot of canopy that we would normally not be able to see through. And because of that, we've been able to find a few additional cities or even vast, large cities and expansions of cities that we did not ever know that was there. And it's now available to us to find visually through laser scanning, and then they can locate them out in the actual field if they're able to trek through all of the jungle and coverage to find those buildings. And, to be honest, what is all this leading to when we think about it? We have the ability to scan everything. We have the ability to process all of that data. We have the ability to create models out of that data. And then we now have the ability to build what we have in the model. And the screen captures that you see down there at the bottom, just a small project that I did in-house here, or actually at my own house, I should say. I went out and I took some pictures of a fire hydrant that was a custom fire hydrant for the county and the area that I live in. I went and did that with Recap Photo, posted a bunch of photos in there, processed it through the Recap Photo desktop app, cleaned it up a little bit. So you can see that the second model, what I did was I just cleaned up all of the outsides and kind of cut off the bottom where the riser was. Ended up with just a standard fire hydrant, but it's that custom shape that we have here in the county. Exported that out to an STL file, and then I was able to 3D print it. I've got a small little 3-inch high 3D printed custom fire hydrant that's sitting on my desk, but that is sort of giving you an idea of the possibilities that are out there. And thinking back to that cathedral fire, one of the big things was all of the structural beams and that design of how everything was set up on the inside of that building. And with that scan, they should be able to reprint a composite model of all of those beams to see how everything was built and use that to possibly reconstruct everything and rebuild that to the way that it was, or even use that as a foundation for an improved design if they want to. And that is leveraging our Recap and Recap Photo products that we have available to us in our Autodesk 2020 software. It is 11:55, and that is just about the end of my presentation, I believe. And our last slide coming up here is just another recap. We had gone through our Autodesk 2020 products for the infrastructure design suite. Katana, do we have any questions at this point?
Yeah, we do have a couple. Pertaining to recap, does it still require Pro to do meshes and interact with recap photo?
That is correct as far as I'm aware. So without the Pro version, you don't have access to Autodesk Recap Photo, which is installed as a separate icon, but I believe is part of the Pro package. So Recap Photo is its own separate product that launches, and the only way I was able to get the install was by having access to Recap Pro. So I believe you still do need Pro in order to get to Photo. And this is what I have on the screen now is the clean version of that fire hydrant. So you can see it's pretty nice. This was probably about 35 pictures that I took, but all different angles, and it happened to be overcast that day. So there wasn't a whole lot of shadowing going on, but this was I think a 10 megapixel digital DSLR camera that I went out and took the pictures with and posted them all up there. And that's what built this model, or the original model was the one that you saw with the ground coverage. And then I was able to use Recap Photo to clean up the outside edges and then come up with just this fire hydrant as is. And then from there, I went with the export option and exported out to a STL file. And that's what we've got. And that's what I have printed in that little picture as well.
Okay, next question. Will the new purge also purge MicroStation DGN data?
It's a good question. I did not check on MicroStation DGN files. I don't have any DGN information in here, so I would not be able to check on whether that does go through or not. If I do a dash purge to see some of the options, let me do a check there. Just to run through the list, I don't see any mention of MicroStation DGN information. So it's not going to search for DGN specific information as far as I'm aware. And if it was in the drawing, I don't think it would purge. It would be somehow a separate tool that would search for MicroStation data as opposed to purging MicroStation data.
And are there still issues with saving a DWG file backwards to older versions and maintaining the full extended data?
If you're talking about Civil 3D, then yes. We were still not able to just save back a file from Civil 3D to a previous version. Like 2018, 19, and 20 are all cross-compatible, so you're just doing a standard save there, and you should be able to open it in any file. But if you are working with Civil 3D 2017 or 16 or 15, you cannot just save back and expect it to work. You're stripping it down to the standard AutoCAD objects at that point. So it's almost like an export to AutoCAD. With plain AutoCAD, you are going to get, I believe it's blocks out of the objects that are not defined in the previous versions. So there is not a consistent maintaining of data in its original form, even if you are saving back. And that's one of the scenarios where we are always trying to recommend that if you're working with a specific version, try and stick with that version as much as possible. Or if your consultants or customers are working with a specific version, then we would recommend that you also work with that version for the project.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and if anyone had any other questions, we'll follow up with you directly. Are there storm events greater than the 100-year-old available, i.e. 200 and 500 years?
As far as I'm aware, it is only up to 100-year events, but that could be a limitation of the IDF curve that I imported. If the data is not there, it wouldn't let me choose it. So I'm not sure if that is something that is applicable at this point, but definitely worth checking on. And that's something that we can either follow up with Autodesk on or follow up with you after the webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll get back to you on any questions that we didn't answer today. And thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.